Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, this week, my co-host Tom, who just right before we went live, like literally at the minute I was hitting the button, decided to dump his entire Fire Slayer force that he was preparing to paint onto the floor. So everything slid off. It was an apocalyptic event. How you doing, Tom?
Hey, friends. Luckily they all have ward. They're all Hearthguard Berserkers, and so they all have ward saves, and it just bounced.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. You don't have to actually worry. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Like as we know, Hearthguard are naturally immune to that sort of fall. Yeah, exactly. The beard save just comes in, and hair save or whatever, and solves the problem. Yeah.
Yep.
So as you can see, I'm on the road again this week, so hence it's just Tom and I tonight. But we're going to continue discussing the GHB. As there's so much more to discuss, and we still won't wrap it all up tonight, like I'm sure of it, because we're going to do a whole different show on meeting engagements. So tonight we'll hope to tackle some of the stuff that we didn't get last week, namely like the scenarios, the terrain rules, stuff like that. And we're going to try to cover some fun narrative stuff too. But first, the no news. Tom.
Clear, organized bases from GW for Armageddon.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose that's you mean Apocalypse?
Or Apocalypse. I don't know, whatever that game is. It's an A word that has to do with destruction.
Sure. Yes, movement trays are back, not officially. They're just there for Apocalypse, and you can also use them there if you want. Okay.
You know what kills them for me? Is the random positioning of them.
Okay.
Like if you've looked at them, they're not tight clouds, to like facilitate attacking over. Like they're random distances away from each other, like 5 millimeters, 10 millimeters of spacing between the various models. And so they're all different clouds. They're not organized.
Mm-hmm.
There's no like cohesion bases. So like if you put your stuff in those models, not everything will be able to attack over the bases.
Yep, they are not maximized for your potential
for AOS play. And I saw that and I was like, that was a missed opportunity. Now, to their credit, like I'm sure that they wanted to look natural on the battlefield and everything wouldn't be in like very like formal structure. But
also for the game they're intended for, Apocalypse, it doesn't matter at all because you're just gonna like whole units.
You're just gonna shoot
fight or don't and shoot and die. And it's just like you're gonna be picking up whole units off the battlefield. So yeah, I mean it's that kind of micro measuring isn't really relevant for Apocalypse, right?
Nope, I totally understand why they did it.
Yeah, I mean the reality is we've got all the options we need as far as other bases go. We mentioned like the little mini mags last week, so okay, cool. It's fine. We're good. All good here. Thanks. Yeah. Thumbs up. Yeah. And then there was a rumor engine that I don't know, could be anything, but you're gonna have to share it. It was fine. It looks like it looks kind of like the back of the contorted epitome mirror.
Looks kind of like elves. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. If you want to share it, go ahead.
I'm looking for it real quick.
Sure. I mean, it's a stylish thing. Yeah, as I said, it looked like the back of the contorted epitome mirror. I just painted that recently. Obviously, it's not that. It's not. I'm not saying it's a Slanesh thing. I'm saying that's what it looks like, right?
I mean, it could be like a Slanesh. I don't know. Like I was gonna say something.
Good wrap up, Tom.
I was gonna say something like, well, it could be like a
warband, like some part of the Slanesh.
Yes, like I was gonna go that direction, and then I was like, nah, it's probably not. Sure. Like we can just.
I mean, we've still got 2 Warcry Chaos Warbands to reveal, right?
Yep.
We've seen 4 of them so far. There are 6 Chaos ones total. Okay.
Yep. There you go.
I'm hoping that one of them is more. Here, we'll lock on Tom here. There we go. Yep.
That's elves. That's elves, baby.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Sure. Could be elves. Could be anything. This is one of those ones I don't like because it's not anything.
I think it's gemstones.
Sure. It is gemstones. Yes, you can tell by the way it's painted.
Right. I was going to say, like, the lighting that they did on the circular things are gemstones lighting.
Yeah.
The right and left kind of look feathery.
Sure. It could also be a crotch plate, by the way, of a very big monster standing kind of with his legs spread, right? Like this could literally be
these are the legs.
Yeah.
This is his groin.
Yes,
he has six gemstones
on his groin plate. Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Cool.
I'm just saying we're zoomed in on a monster's cod piece. That's correct.
Got it. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I think these could be like wings. Like imagine like a big eagle, hawk, something. And then like this is the back plate. Maybe there's a saddle up top, up here. And this is the like that'd be pretty far up though. No, maybe. I don't know. Like these could be giant wings. This could be part of like the saddle piece.
It could be the back of the saddle, like right in front of this is where the person sits. We're looking directly down from the top of the model. Yeah, sure.
Yep. Yeah, you know what that says to me?
What's that? Swift Hawk?
Swift Hawk agents.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
By the way, when I said Slanesh Warband, like, Luke had said in the comments that that these aren't God marked. Yeah, I know they're not God marked, but they're clearly inspired by some of the gods. Like there's a loose alignment there of kind of where they want to be or what sort of inspires them, right? Like
we have a Korn-esque Scuba Steve warband, and we have a
Zinch-esque bird people warband, yeah.
A Zinch-esque raven-based bird people. Yep.
Yeah. Again, like I understand that they're actually just slaves to darkness units, and they've said they're slaves to darkness units, so you can use them in slaves to darkness armies, but that they're not marked. Like I get that. I'm just saying, like you can thematically. I'm not looking for more Slanesh marked things. But I am looking to see like the warband that is thematically inspired by that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, LLV said crows could be Nurgle. No way. I played Warhammer Online, and
and
I know what
the three-eyed raven.
Yeah, man, I know what that caster looks like, and it was all bird people. The caster from that game,
like the caster with the skull in his hand, like he literally
and all his
just.
Go ahead. Yeah, all his legendary armor, right? Yeah.
Yeah, his legendary. Yeah, like he was literally, like I am sure that the art from that probably inspired the model team.
Sure.
From the bird, from the zealot, what they called a zealot in Warhammer Age of Reckoning.
But that being said, yes, I understand. There's a lot of chaos iconography that crosses over amongst multiple things, right? Like tentacles get owned by a lot of different chaos gods and things like that, right? Like
do you remember
fire dances around a lot of different people and just stuff like that. So
do you remember what the healer was in Warhammer?
What, on the dark people or on the bad people?
The dark for the elves, yeah.
The Cainite?
It was. Do you remember what the name was?
No.
It was Doc. It was the disciple of Cain.
Oh, he was the disciple of Cain. Yeah, you're right. It was the.
And he ran around with a chalice and healed people.
Yeah,
it was the hag.
Yeah, no, that's true. Absolutely. I mean, look, Warhammer Online was a great game that we lost many, many hours of our lives to. But so here we go. Anyway,
so many.
Not what we're here to talk about. Yeah, and that's basically all the news. That's it. Pretty light news week because they're pushing mostly Apocalypse. So cool. Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the big freeze right now. Like everybody is waiting on bated breath to see what happens to the meta for the next 6 months.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because if they properly make the necessary adjustments to FEC and Skaven, right, then I think
potentially changes to Fire Slayers as well.
Well, I don't. My point is, I don't know that Fire Slayers are. Look, Hearthguard Berserkers are a sort of problematic unit, but they suffer from all the traditional things that Death Star units suffer from, right? Like this game has never been great at allowing Death Star units of walking dudes who move 4 inches on foot to win games. That's just not it's not the way Age of Sigmar is played, right?
No, you're absolutely right. And to be fair, like if any changes did come to him, I honestly just think it's you lower the cap. You lower the model count on the Death Star to like 20 models instead of 30, and you've literally just fixed the issue.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't probably maybe couldn't say. I haven't thought about it deeply enough. My point is like I would argue that if we fix FEC and Skaven in the right way with the right amount of light touch. By the way, despite some of my hyperbole of joking about these armies, I have no desire to see them like kneecapped and brought out of contention.
Right.
I don't want to, and I think we've been clear about that. Like, I don't want to see them get the Caradron Overlord or Disciple.
No, the dock touch this year was the right touch.
Sure. So, I mean, maybe not. Maybe it could have been a little stronger. I don't know. Whatever. The point is, it was close. It
Sure.
wasn't overly strong. I think everybody would agree on that, right?
Yep.
But my point is that I think if those two are brought back in line, we'll actually be in the most competitive meta we've ever been in since we started this game. Because I think we'll be back to sort of where we were at the beginning of the year, but with
I would say I don't know. Last year's meta was pretty
even
strong.
more. Yes, but now I would argue we have more forces with GHB 19 coming back in. Like I think Disciples Zinch is back on the menu. I think that people will have fun with Iron Jaws. I don't think they'll be supremely competitive, but they'll be interesting, and you'll see them bouncing around. My point is, I think that it'll be a pretty broadly competitive meta once those two are sort of brought in line. Personal feeling. So
sure, and I would agree with that. I actually think they pretty significantly strengthened endless spells.
Mm-hmm.
With the changes on damage, and I think that will bring Doc in line. I think that will actually, I think the presence of Purple Sun will, I don't think it'll fix, but I think it will rein in Fire Slayers, for example.
Sure, and I don't agree. Like, so Cinderfall made a comment about like that Darkling Covens have an interesting couple play now with not only the points on Blackguard going down, but also things like the lunchbox, the brainy dinghy, and stuff like that, solving some of these movement problems. Right, that they've traditionally had. I don't disagree with that at all. Also, my answer.
I still think they have a hero problem.
Hold
though.
on,
like
hold
to
on.
be clear,
I need to make fun of Caleb real quick. You need to pause.
Okay.
Caleb, hello, Caleb. The answer is you need to get good, buddy, and be a better player. Sorry about your luck. I'm sorry that you're just not very good at this game. I don't know what to tell you. But I hope for you to improve. That's what
Caleb, I agree with you. Slanesh summoning is bent. Don't listen to him.
It's fine. It's fine. Anyways, no, that's just hi, Caleb. Sorry. Caleb's a really good guy and a good player, and he has the unfortunate title of having had to have played Tom in like sort of the bottom rounds of every major Adepticon and every major tournament they've been at together in like round
for the last
4 or
3
5.
years.
For the last 3 years in a row, it's always coming against Tom.
Adepticon.
Yeah, just like the worst way to end a tournament. So, at any rate, just when he commented about that, I thought that was very funny. At any rate, so okay, so you want to get going past the news? Let's talk about some pick of the week. Tom, what do you want to share with everybody?
Pass.
Pass. You don't want to share anything? Okay. Well, that's fine. You can think for a minute, Tom. I'll share something. I want to give a shout out to a very fun, but a short but highly informative video that our buddy Paul did with Radio Free Hammerhall, where he did a great video sort of looking at the deployment type of the scenarios in GHB 18 and 19. And what he pointed out, so we all understand that there's sort of 3 different deployment types, right? The horizontal, the traditional, like across the board, you're wide on the 6 foot. Long ways, in other words, you're staring down the 6 feet in the middle, right? So you kind of are at the ends of it. And then the diagonal deployment, right? And those have names, which he uses, and I don't remember what the names are, but it doesn't matter. We all get it. Horizontal, long, lengthwise, long ways, and diagonal. And what he points out, obviously, as we all know, if you've been to tournaments, you know that oftentimes tournament tables are, they sort of abut each other, right? And so doing lengthwise deployment in a tournament can be rather challenging because you don't have, it's very hard, right? You can't walk around the table in the same way you can at home. And what he pointed out in the video was that if you look at them over 18 and 19, all of the ones that were lengthwise became horizontal or diagonal, and all of the ones that in the new one that are lengthwise were horizontal or diagonal before. So basically, you always have a version of the scenario that's tournament friendly, right? So for example, if something is lengthwise in 19, then it will be either horizontal or diagonal in 18. And so you can use the 18 version, because they even say in the scenario list, you know, like, hey, optionally, you can still use the versions from 18. That's why we've stapled these with, you know, 2019 versions, right? Because the old versions are still valid. I thought that was super cool. Like, what a great, I don't know if that was intentional, but it was, if it was luck or intentional, it's good. Like, that's a pretty awesome thing. So if tournaments don't have a lot of room, if you don't have the space in between tables, boom, you can still use any of the scenarios, but use them in the version that's more tournament friendly. So I thought that was really cool. Check it out. And Paul actually in the video has a little list available where he shows the two versions and the deployment types that they are. So you can actually just have a little quick reference guide. So there you go. That's my pick. I thought that was incredibly insightful, and good on him for going and looking it up. I thought that was cool. What about you, Tom? Have you thought of something now?
I mean, no. Like,
I went and looked at the videos that I watched this week.
Videos,
no, I've been just neck deep in my work, like research stuff, and so like I just have not been engaging the community stuff. So like I could lie to you and be like, hey, go watch Rob's video with the Greeks on the follow up from Heat 3. And I watched it, and it was, you know, like I had it on in the background and listened to it, and it was fun, and they had some great interactions, and you know, it seems like a really fun community. But like
you weren't paying attention to it, is what you're saying?
Right. Like I wasn't dialed in, and I just didn't really listen to much else this week. So
for those who don't know, by the way, Tom is would the appropriate term be you're a doctoral student or doctoral candidate? You're working on your dissertation.
I am a candidate, which means I've done everything but defended.
Yes, there you go. So he's working on his dissertation. So obviously that can take up a lot of time. In addition to having 4 kids. So, you know, there you go. At any rate, it's a good recommendation. So I did watch the Greeks, and it was fun. And I would say you should go watch that. So, hey, there you go. I'll second your thing, Tom, and reinforce it.
There you go.
We'll link them. I'll link it down below. Both videos. One is very short, one is very long. So whether you got 5 minutes or an hour and a half, you got a video to watch. There you go. Okay, so let's talk about some hobby time, man. You're working on something. You're dumping fire slayers on the floor.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, like I'm in like the like you don't go through this because you don't paint like I do, but I'm in like the tedious base coat. Like I've done the technical work on the skin. I've done the technical work on the hair. So the stuff that's like 12 different steps and just the most robust aspects of my painting on the fire slayers, all the freehanding, all that's done. So now I'm like tediously going through and like filling in all the details of their base coats. And for these like handful of elements, I only do like I shouldn't be telling you this considering you're judging this later, but like
the stuff I would notice, Tom.
Yeah, you would notice, but like for some things, I only do a couple of steps. For some things, I put a number of elaborate steps in. The things are going to be flashy and eye grabbing and stuff like that. And so I'm going now to like the tedious of like, okay, I got to fill in the stupid cloth, and then I'm going to wash it. But I'm not even to the washing stage of that dumb cloth. Like I'm literally just base coating all of it, and it's the worst. Like, because they're just naked dwarves, so I'm literally painting like loincloths and stuff like that. And it's the most like nerve-wracking thing because it's near all these things that I've done all of this like very intricate layering on. And it's like I'm using the scale 70 for this one scale 75 blue that I love, but it's like hyper pigment rich. And so like if I get it on anything and try to wipe it off or like wash it off, no matter what, it tints it. And so it's just the worst. Like I have to be hyper careful, and it's a headache. So I've like been piecing out doing all their dumb cloth this entire time, and then I'll go from this to doing the like Vallejo metal color, which runs everywhere because it's like a hyper liquidy metal. And so trying to paint that on, like I'm just at the like very anxious stage of my painting for this like these 40 Hearthguard.
So
well, I mean, I hope you once you dip your brush in Vallejo metal color, I do hope you touch your brush to a paper towel.
like I wick it off. Like I do, I wick it off now. Like I used to not, and it caused lots of problems. I do now. But yeah. So I'm working on that, and then I've gotten 1,000 points of orcs almost put together. I need 2 or 3 more brutes to get the 1,000 points of orcs for Wes, and then he'll start. I'll get all those based, and he'll start with his contrast this next week, hopefully. He's doing 1,000 point paint of contrast. So
nice. Well, good for him.
We'll see if he can be done by his 9th birthday.
So for myself, it's been a very busy hobby week. I finished up the first draft of the big piece I was working on with the Bloodthirster and Shellaxy. And when I say first draft, I mean like I got it to a draft final. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I mean, for people who work in that kind of format, right? You know what draft final means, right? Like you've taken it to a point where you have to have somebody else give commentary on it and that kind of thing. So that was good. I had the class in Olympia, which I want to give a quick shout out. So this class was in Olympia, Washington, at Olympia Cards and Comics. Tom, this was one of the most amazing stores I've ever been in.
I hear that a lot from you.
But this would blow your mind. Okay, like shout out to this store, which is it's in Olympia, Washington. It's like it was only about an hour away from the airport, the Seattle-Tacoma airport. So it's not like, but I understand Seattle is still a distance north of the airport.
It's Seattle area, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, all those cities like Renton and Seattle and Tacoma and Olympia are all kind of like there around the Sound, right?
Yeah.
But like, so it was a huge store. Like, it's massive. The owner has like the land and there's lots of parking, and they built the building specifically for this store. And so it's not like in a strip mall or something. There's a ton of space. There's like an unbelievable product selection of anything nerd related you could ever want. Like her like statue and like sort of maquette range or whatever was just beyond reason. But everything, like all different lines of paints and miniatures and everything, it was great.
Well,
lots of room to play.
I mean, they're in Wizards. They're in Watsy's backyard, though, right?
It's not. I mean, it's a couple hours away, but it's not that far away.
Oh, is it?
I mean,
okay.
It's far. Like, so it goes. Renton's over here, then Seattle, and then down. Down. Whatever. Renton, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia. Like, it's a couple hours away, but it's not that far away. Anyway. It's not like a thing you'd probably go to if you lived and worked in Renton. It'd be a heck of a haul.
Sure.
But anyway, it was a big store. There was probably like 6 to 10 associates working there, and the owner, like, she knew everybody's name when they walked in, would say hi to everybody, knew what they wanted. Like, it was just the most friendly experience. It was incredible. And it was just such a great space for it. So if you are, in that area, I really can't recommend the store enough. Just their selection, everything was great. Everybody was friendly. Everybody was awesome and ready to help at all points in time. It was everything you want a store to be.
Nice.
So yeah, there you go. And shout out to Jack, who's in the chat from Rerolling Ones, who came down and had lunch, hung out for a little while. So that was great. It was good to see both of you. So that was a lot. And yes, Doug, I'm disappointed in you. Very disappointed, Doug. But that's all right. I'll forgive you this time. Anyway, so but it was a really, really great shop. So I did the Night Titan, or the Imperial Knight, class. And that was a lot of fun. Some people made some really incredible knights. A very fun thing, Tom, was that while I was at the shop, I just went ahead and picked up my contrast paints, right? Because I want to support the shop. They're hosting us. And so, I mean, I didn't pick up the whole range, but I picked up maybe a dozen of them or something.
Yep. That's what I did.
Yeah.
I just went through and, I was like, I'm going to want these. I'm going to play with these. Sure. That looks like a fun color.
Yeah. I got colors that I thought looked cool or whatever. And then I used them in the class. Right?
Oh,
I'm
nice.
like, well, let's just see how these airbrush and stuff like that. And just played with them. So, because whatever. And I really enjoyed them through the airbrush. Like, they were fantastic, actually. for doing like the kind of way I like to work through my airbrush, doing these sorts of thinner layers over an undershade and stuff like that. So the long story short is that I'm not going to have a contrast tutorial this weekend, or the hobby cheating for them. There is a normal hobby cheating this weekend, but I'm on the road. I got back from teaching, was home for maybe 24 hours, and then had to leave again to, be on the road again for the whole week. And I won't be home until Sunday night. So I've got a long bunch of travel in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And, but next week is July 4th. I've got some extra time. I will be recording the full complete contrast tutorial, so that'll be coming that next week, that July 6th or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So that's when that'll be happening, and we'll cover both brush and airbrush and lots of different interesting ways to use them. I was able to play with them a little bit. I do like to actually know something about the products that I'm trying to teach people how to use before I just throw up a video. I felt like I want to actually understand what these things are capable of. So there you go. Yeah. And then I started working on another little Slanesh Vice Leader in one of the Creature Caster matriarchs and got her finished sort of in that 24 hours, because that's how I roll. And I didn't get her base done though, so there it is. Cool. That's hobby time. Busy. Despite having almost no time, I still managed to fit in a lot of hobby because I have a problem and an addiction, and there we go. So, Tom, let's talk about...
The first step is acknowledging it.
Absolutely. I don't plan to ever move to a later step, but I am willing to acknowledge. I'm not in denial. I have acknowledged and stopped. That's it.
No, I mean, I get it. I'm still working on that acknowledgement thing.
Sure. When I was in, like, I don't know if this was a thing beyond the small town we were from, but like sure. All of the Catholic schools used to have this race that they would run in May called Positive Addiction. It was meant to be like an alternative to doing drugs. Sure. Right. So it's like, I've got a positive addiction, like meaning like running and being healthy and crap like that, and all I could is like, and that's it. This is my positive addiction. There you go. I'm positively addicted. I'm addicted, but I'm super happy about it. So,
I went to a nearby public school, and that was not the case.
Sure.
We did not have that race, Vince.
There you go. So, at any rate, where should we start, Tom? Do you want to start with the kind of terrain and stuff like that? Because that's kind of some simpler stuff.
That would be a fun conversation. Yeah.
Sure. So let's start at the beginning, which is that in GHB 19, they decided to print rules.
They decided to cut Ben Curry another paycheck.
No, I'm not going to talk about, well, sure, maybe. I mean, like, yeah, okay, but that's fine. But that's not really what I mean here. Like, what I was going to say was they decided to print these rules about, like, how to choose terrain.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about the 6 new terrain pieces.
No, I'm okay with those. I think those are sweet.
Okay, I didn't realize which direction you were going with the terrain discussion. Okay, yeah, so you're talking about terrain placement right now, not new types of terrain that's been added to the... okay, so we're on the terrain placement discussion. Got it.
Correct. So they added this thing called like battlefields, and it talks about the number of pieces of terrain you should both set up, and you get to roll them on this table on the side, and like faction terrain has to be set up within these certain rules, and if it can't be set up within these rules, then you just don't use it, and so on and so forth. And my response to that entire section is, what? What? Was anybody asking for this? Why is this in here? It is the craziest thing I've ever, obviously we're waiting on the FAQ, because as printed, it straight up made some of the faction terrain just unusable, literally in all cases. Like, for example, Skaven novels just cannot be set up ever under any circumstances.
Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not going to hate the faction fix to Skaven that they just implemented.
Sure. Shut off their novels, yeah.
Yes. But no, I agree. It'll get FAQ'd. And the reality is that, no, at events you're not going to deploy terrain. Terrain's going to get deployed automatically by the Buy the TOs. They're going to set up the tables. You're not going to do that. Ignore all that stuff.
Yeah, like it's just the weirdest thing that got printed. And like, yes, if you're concerned about the faction terrain thing, stop being concerned about it, because they've already announced in like 4 different places that the FAQ is going to address this and fix it. Why it's in there in the first place, I have no idea. Like, I can't explain that. I don't know how that snuck through. Maybe somebody just didn't read it. I don't know where the QC failed, but whatever. But this whole section is mind-boggling. Hold on, because like, even on the place this number of pieces of terrain and roll on this table, like, that table doesn't have the new stuff they just released in the boxes. It's just like complete didn't need to be there, you know? It's like when you're looking at an otherwise good movie, but there's just like one scene that you're like, that could have been cut, right? Yeah. Like, and the GHB is a really good book overall. I'm super thrilled with 90+% of what's in there, 98, 99%. But this one page is just like, nope, just redact, delete, do not need, did not want, thank you.
Yeah, I just don't get it. It's funny, like, I want to put a pin on something real quick. I'm going to digress from this to say, like, for those of you that have been a viewer, you know, like, we're approaching 5 years, right? Sure. If you're
rounding up a little bit there, but sure.
I mean, we've finished 4 years. We're moving towards our 5th. And a couple of years ago, like 2 to 3 years ago, if this had happened in a book, I'd have lost my mind. I would have.
Sure.
Because I'd have been like, how do you miss this?
Sure.
Or how about my favorite one was with meeting engagements? They don't tell you who goes first.
Right.
Like, it doesn't happen. Like,
right.
Go tell me who goes first. It's not in the rules. They forgot that. Okay. But again, 3 years ago, I would have lost my mind. But the reality is that we're dealing with a different GW now. We just are. This is not the same company. This is like, I look at this and go, okay, they'll fix that in 2 weeks.
Yeah, sure. Exactly.
So
also,
they're going to fix it.
I've never been I've always been like a forest for the trees kind of guy. You know what I mean? Sure. And what I mean is, like, I don't know. I don't set the bar at perfection. I do wonder how this got in here, but in the end, I'm like, what a strange oddity. And that's about as much as it bothers me. But especially because I know it will be fixed quick.
Sure, and that's my point, is that I know they're going to fix it. And so, like, I don't have to worry about it because I know it'll get dealt with. That, you know, like, there's a sense in which they have earned that, like, they have earned your trust to give them 2 weeks. Okay? So, for those that are losing their mind about this, stop it.
Agreed. All right, so I think that's all we need to say about that one, right? I mean, there's nothing else about that. Cool, great. So now let's talk about.
Otherwise, let me just say, aw, poor Nurgle trees. Like, because in the original rules, like, those they would have never earned corruption. Like, summoning? Sure. What's summoning? I don't know. Trees don't go down anymore.
Right. They also added new triumphs specifically for match play. They're all fine. Cool. Yeah. It's a fine triumphs table. I'm okay with it. Great. I like the specific triumphs table. So now let's talk about the thing you were talking about, which is the new scenery dice, right? The new scenery types, I should say.
Yes.
You were referencing the dice specifically, but yeah.
Yes.
So
I was making a joke about the fact that everybody uses terrain dice. I mean, scenery dice. I do. From Ben Curry through Bad Dice podcast, release those wonderful scenery dice. And now they release 6 more. And so you can go buy new dice for that. And so that was the joke. But
sure, I've always gotten like the Warlord editions because that's the way I roll. And
sure.
And so they come with the little markers, you know.
Yes.
And this is what's called sunk cost fallacy, because I'm like, man, if I have to pay this extra money for that Warlord edition, I am using these little markers. Gosh darn it! I don't care. They don't say the words and only have the pictures. I'm back in Nathan. All right, like Nathan on Honest Warrior was talking about liking the pictures. I'm with it. Pictures, man. Pictures.
No.
Money's worth.
No. I want to be able to throw dice at terrain and be like, this is that. Done. Moving on.
I understand it's actually the superior selection and remembering mechanism, but whatever. I've got to use my little token somehow, man. All right. So let's talk about these new items. So previously, obviously, this was like, damned, arcane, inspiring, deadly, mystical, sinister. Okay, we all remember those, and those are still, basically the same. There is some little minor changes. Like, did you notice that arcane now also affects dispelling? That kind of thing, right? So, a relevant and notable and important thing. Okay.
The types of changes that we need.
Yeah, just exactly what you would kind of expect, right? For rules cleanup. All right, but now our 6 new ones are overgrown, entangling, volcanic, commanding, healing, and nullification. And obviously the way you get these is by you roll now a dice first to see which table you're rolling on, right? So like 1 to 3 is the old table, 4 to 6 is the new table. So overgrown scenery. Models are not visible to each other if an imaginary straight line 1 millimeter wide drawn between the closest points of the 2 models crosses over more than 1 inch of any overgrown terrain feature. Does not apply if either model can fly. So if you thought to yourself...
They couldn't get enough wildwood.
Exactly. If you thought to yourself, you know what my problem is with Sylvaneth wildwoods? There's not enough of them. That's... Great. Now you can turn other terrain features into Sylvaneth Wildwoods. I will say, if they removed this from Sylvaneth Wildwoods and just kept it here, I would hate it less. Because I agree. Sylvaneth Wildwoods...
Because players wouldn't be able to control the terrain. That's the problem.
Right. Yes. There's 3 things that make Sylvaneth Wildwoods terrible. 1, this rule. 2, the fact that the trees make it impossible, the old woods, that is to say. Yeah. The trees made it impossible to move around in between, and 3, that players controlled them, right? I should note that the new Wildwood solves one of these problems. So,
indeed. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I will say this: Skywardens and Endrinriggers for shooting loadouts. Your stock is rising.
Yeah, sure. I mean, because flying units all ignore it. Yep. All right. So, entangling is a really interesting one. This one is like, who is entangling terrain? Might as well just say, unless it's on an objective, right? Like if there's an objective that you're going to move a unit onto and basically never move again, right? If that's your goal, like you stand and or die.
This says, don't go here.
Don't go here. Yeah. Entangling is this is old school mystical levels of crippling. Subtract 2 from run and charge rolls to a minimum of 0 for units that are within 1 inch of any entangling terrain features.
Nope. Pass.
Wow. Like,
go away. Leave me.
Crippling. And people don't think about like you hear that and like you're like, well, it's only run and charge. And it's, okay, like what does that really amount to? Well, let's think about it this way. Let's put this in real numbers. First of all, you now have a 33% chance when you run to run no additional inches. That's number 1, right? Because it can go to 0.
Right.
You cannot achieve a run higher than a 4.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. It is absolutely, it just -2 to run is unbelievably impactful. Charge rolls, we've all failed the 2-inch charge, right?
Sure.
Everybody's had that experience.
You mean the 3-inch?
Now you can easily fail the 2, 3, and 4-inch charges. And like when 7s become 9s, when 7-inch charges become 9s, like the odds swing on that is insane.
Right.
You go from not quite 50%, or like around 50%. It's actually a little more for a 7, but to like well below to like 13%. That is a heck of a swing.
Yeah, I see that, and it says 2 things to me. The first of those things is this terrain is now the purpose of this terrain is to stick Fireslayer Battlesmiths and other aura projecting models in. Because it becomes a bunker to like prevent charges. Realistically, like they have to move up to you, and even a 3-inch charge needs a natural 5.
Well, I mean, you have to be on the other side of it, but sure, because it's when you make the roll, you have to be within an inch. But yes.
Okay. Well, it depends on how big the train is. That's the other half of it.
Sure.
Yeah. And then the other one, which I love, is like, boy, the stock on like Tamerkin's Horde, and or
that
Plague
already
Monks.
imposes a -1 penalty to charge.
And Plague Monks, which also give a -1 penalty to charge. Like, when this stuff's on the board, just positioning them near this stuff, like you're moving into like -3, -4 inch charges.
Yeah, I don't. Plague Monks got rid of that rule, but I.
Oh, did they get rid of the rule? Okay.
Yeah, but Tamerkin's Horde still has it.
Okay, sorry. Tamerkin's Horde still has it. I didn't realize that they removed it from Plague Monks. I knew they still had a bunch of crazy abilities.
They have yes, they still have far too many rules on that scroll, but they don't have that one anymore.
Okay, so it's still on Tamerkin's Horde.
Yeah, it is. Sure.
And I mean, -3 charge makes me giggle.
Well, sure, and God forbid anything that halves your charge roll comes into play,
oh,
right? Because you multiply and then add or subtract. So like, an 8-inch charge becomes a 4-inch charge, becomes a 2-inch charge. Like just
because multipliers apply before addition and subtraction.
Right, exactly. You know, just like cogs can sort of save you from a half roll in a lot of cases, right? Where like an 8 becomes a 4 becomes a 6, right? Like that's not as bad, but the -2 is just so massively impactful. So yeah, there you go. Okay,
makes me giggle.
So entangling, if you see entangling, do not go in there unless you never plan to leave. Or can teleport. If you've got easy access to teleport, then okay, great. You can just pick people up and put them out there. Like I assume Seraphon don't care that much about putting their units in entangling stuff, right?
Yeah, Night Haunt's like cool story, bro.
Right. Yeah. All right. Next one is volcanic. Which I really like this one. At the start of each hero phase, roll a die for each volcanic terrain feature on a 6. Each unit within 1 inch of that terrain feature suffers D3 mortal wounds. Cool. What a fun little thing.
Yeah.
Like, neat.
I like it.
Yeah, sure. That's fun. I love random scatter mortal wounds. It makes it so you kind of don't want to put heroes around there, right? Or things that are susceptible to getting gibbed by mortal wound splashes. But like, obviously, the big units don't care. Like 60 gits don't really care about a volcanic thing. They'll run around on volcanoes all day. Not sure that passes the logical smell test, but that's fine.
Sure.
All right, next up we have maybe the most game impactful one, I think. I think this takes the cake for game impacting.
Okay.
Commanding. At the start of your hero phase, if your general and no enemy general is within 1 inch of any commanding terrain features, you add 1 to the number of command points you receive that hero phase. We should state that obviously one of the things that happened in the new GHB is that you can only buy, and you have to buy it. It's a purchase. It doesn't count toward a triumph and stuff. 1 command point now, right?
And you can't get more.
Right. And then at the same time, you also have things like mercenaries that remove your command point you would normally gain in your first turn, right?
Yep.
So the reality is that's a big deal. Getting an extra, going from if you're just sort of have no command point shenanigans, you're not Gloomspite or something, and you're just relying on your standard 1 a turn. Having your general there and moving to 2 a turn is like, good Lord, that's a big difference.
Yeah, like I'm really mixed on this terrain piece because like it could, for some armies, it's so swingy. Like Iron Jaws are like wog. Although what I'll say is this, but it also limits their movement because so that suddenly that actually becomes like a nice balancing factor because that means
I actually don't like it for Iron Jaws because my general needs to be moving usually too much to stay near a command trait. I think where it's more impactful is maybe something like Death, where they get where their general is often hiding in the back and often could camp this thing if it happened to be near their deployment zone or somewhere where they could easily protect, and now has a lot more access to things for bringing units back in grave sites and crap like that.
Yeah, I mean,
don't get me wrong, I love a good WA as much as anybody else. And hey, if it's sitting in my deployment zone and I can start my general on it, so turn 1 I get an extra command point, even one more command point is one more wall, baby, or one more Mighty Destroyers move.
That's 50 free points.
Sure. Like, no doubt, even if I only get that one turn, it's impactful as all get out, right? I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't camp it and get the sort of maximum benefit out of Iron Jaws. Because, like, if it's in my deployment zone, turn one, my general's not standing on it anymore, realistically.
I mean, what I would say is this. I could have done with them saying, you may spend one additional, like, if your general is here, you may spend one command point for free each turn or something like that. Like the first command point that you spend each turn while your general is here, is free or whatever. Because I don't like that it's just a
well, look, here's what I'll say. If they did that, then the answer would be, and you can only use it on the 6 standard command abilities, which we'll talk about the other 3 here in a minute.
Right.
But the real
which I'd be okay with that too.
The real answer is a much simpler implementation than that, Tom. Okay.
Okay.
The real answer is roll a die on a 4-up, you get a bonus command point.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
should have odds.
I agree with that.
Like, that's the simplest, easiest fix. And by the way, if I was going to put money on this thing changing at some point in time in like an FAQ, this is how it would change. They would add the 4-up roll to it, like most other things like this have. Right? There's some swinginess to it. It's not an automatic effect, and that would have been so simple.
I was considering in my future Night Haunt running the terrain piece from Forbidden Power because I was so command point starved.
Right.
I'm going to drop 100 points on a terrain piece to do this 50% of the time. And being able to roll into that is just so significant for some armies.
Yeah. So I mean, it's so impactful and so game changing. I feel like the better answer here would have been just make it a 4-up. But as it is now,
that said, I don't know that it's any more impacting than Arcane for some armies. To give, like, so for example,
I understand.
Gosh, Arcane, like,
sure.
It just to move him into untouchable
especially
territory.
People who are already at like +2, moving them to +3. Yeah, I get it. I understand. It's a big swing. I think it's probably still more impactful, but whatever. I get it. I understand your argument.
Give Tzeentch Arcane, like,
sure.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, healing. At the start of your hero phase, roll a die for each friendly unit within 1 inch of any healing terrain feature. On a 6, you can heal D3 wounds allocated to that unit.
Stop. Nobody cares.
Correct. Like this, if it said or return D3 models, I would start getting interested. But like the fact that you're any 1 and 2 wound units just probably don't care. Occasionally, you'll get a heal heroes every so often.
Right. Like you would camp heroes on here to negate splash through wounds occasionally.
Right. I mean, as usual, they rate healing really, really highly in this game. It's like the opposite of Magic, where like healing has almost no value whatsoever. But
so silly. Anyways,
sure. But in this game, healing is apparently something that is very rarefied. Okay. And then finally, nullification.
I will say this. I think nullification is a contender for heaviest, stuff. Even though, like, obviously, I admit command points are more valuable, but continue.
Sure. This is a big one. In the enemy hero phase, if any heroes, bold, from your army are within 1 inch of any nullification terrain features, one of them, only one of them, can attempt to unbind one spell in the same manner as a wizard. If they can already unbind spells, they can attempt to unbind one additional spell. In addition, an endless spell that is set up or finishes a move within 1 inch of any nullification terrain feature is dispelled. Yeah.
This is so significant for the meta. Like I can't overstate this. Because of the presence of this terrain piece, it will reel in. Like it is the hidden check to things like Tzeentch Purple Sun armies.
You're saying because what would happen is if that terrain piece exists and it's campable in any way, it literally invalidates the entire strategy of endless spells because I can put my choice unit on it and you literally can't touch me with an endless spell.
Right.
Right.
And if endless spells are anywhere near this terrain piece, every time you activate, like whenever you get to choose that, you get to choose to dispel it, because what you can do is just move it next to the terrain piece and immediately remove it from the table. So its mere presence with predatory spells means that any predatory things that are placed near, if you get to move them, you get to pull them from the table.
Sure, assuming their move could carry them to within an inch
Right.
of the nullification piece.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Like, just its mere presence is heavy.
Sure. I would argue that maybe, may I construct a potential alternate scenario for you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So you're an endless spell heavy army.
Yep.
And at the top of the battle round, you get to move all your predatory endless spells around, right?
Yep.
So you take your purple sun or whatever that's positioned wherever it is.
Yep.
And you run it through the enemy force.
Yep. Auto dispel so you can recast it.
Correct.
Yes, I think that's valuable. What I would say is this: if I'm running a endless spell heavy army, I'm probably already running the Verdant Cloak to do that. Like, it's just going to make it more guaranteed. I will already have that trick up my sleeve.
Yeah, sure, but that's my point. Like, being able to do it to two things seems pretty good. Like, because you got two sort of pseudo automatically, right, where you're not rolling. Yeah. So somebody asked a question in the chat of like, if you have bonuses to unbind, do you get to use your bonuses for the additional unbind attempt? Yeah, because it's, if you can already unbind, you can attempt to unbind one additional spell. So it would be done with whatever other things you have.
Whatever numbers you are normally at.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, the new terrain features are interesting. They're
I love that.
Cool.
See them exploring the design space around it.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, my only slight pushback is I felt like commanding should have been automatic. It should have been a roll.
Yep.
Beyond that, I like all of them. They're fine. Like they don't all need to be hugely impactful. They shouldn't be, by the way. Right? Like, you want something in there like healing that's sort of like less impactful.
Well, what I'll say is this.
The interesting thing about the FAQ will be they've created a timing thing with this.
Okay.
Right? Because it says, so the wording is an endless spell that is set up or finishes a move within 1 inch of any nullification terrain feature is dispelled. Okay. Yep. So the order of operations on that seems to imply it has to be set up to be dispelled.
No.
Okay. In addition, an endless spell that is set up or finishes a move, which we can remove that part. So let's just read the sentence without that in there. An endless spell that is set up within 1 inch of any nullification terrain feature is dispelled. It's not unbound, right? So it was never cast.
Right.
It's dispelled. You dispel endless spells that are in play. You unbind endless spells as they're being cast and they never manifest. So if I drop an Everblaze Comet onto a nullification piece of terrain, does it still trigger its impact? Because it says upon setup, this thing happens. So do I set it up, resolve all the effects, and then the nullification trigger happens and it dispels it? Or do I effectively set it up and then like all other triggers are sort of interrupted by this dispel effect that happens immediately? There's no precedent for interrupting effects really within AOS, right? And so like
you would resolve all setup effects first, because it has to. So the funny thing is it has to resolve. It has to be set up in order for the dispel to happen.
Correct.
And if it has to be set up in order for it to be dispelled, that means that when it's set up, all the setup effects go into play. Now, the question is, if it's predatory and gets to move right away, what happens if it moves out of the area?
Sure. Like, well, the question is, did it still like do that trigger?
Oh, it did still set up technically. So
right. And so it's kind of sitting
so
around.
it's still going to have, it's going to get removed no matter what.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I would say is that what it stops is like if somebody tries to like drop a mirror, like one end of a spell mirror, where it would get sucked through the mirror and set up on the other side, right?
Sure.
Then when it sets up, that's when it would get zapped.
Yeah, sure. But again, if anything says upon setup, do blah, 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 right? Then blah, blah, blah still happens.
Yeah.
And, you know, Sean Clark in the comments just said basically both it's setting up 2 simultaneous triggers on your turn. And generally when that happens, you choose the order of operations, which is sort of the current running theory, right?
Yep.
So one would assume it actually makes something like Everblaze Comet even, you know, more potent, right? Because I can just drop it, pop it, and it's gone. Like I get all the bennies, but you know, like sure, it doesn't sit there and keep dinging.
It doesn't tick. But I can just basically recast it every turn without having to worry about it. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So it's just an interesting, like I can certainly see that interpretation of it. That I think like my reading of the raw is that it would still go off and fire any of its effects, right? Like anything that happens upon setup.
Yeah.
But like I would love to see this in an FAQ where it just sort of explains that this is how this thing happens, right? And great, cool, great, awesome.
We are very quickly approaching Magic the Gathering levels of sequencing.
I really don't want that. I do not want, please do not stop that.
Here comes the LIFO, baby.
Yeah. No, the dispel is not a May ability, Paul. Paul asked if the dispel is a May ability. It is dispelled.
Right.
It is an automatic thing. It's setting up a force trigger. Anyway, so that's kind of an interesting thing that I thought we should absolutely cover because I hope somebody asked that question. If not, somebody email that question in.
Like right now.
Right. Because my guess is like, I don't think we'll actually see, I don't know, maybe they'll have the FAQ at the beginning of next week, but I think
it'll be
the end of next week.
Yeah, I think it'll be after. Well, they don't recognize 4th of July, so it'll probably be next week.
No, they don't celebrate losing day. That's our day. We get that one. Yeah. You don't get second place trophy day. Sorry. Participant award is not a day they're celebrating.
I'm gonna do my current meme.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. At any rate, okay, so let's talk about the new command abilities. All right, so we have 3 new command abilities to be added to our sort of roster of the existing ones, right? Of run for 6 and reroll a charge and be immune to battle shock to the face.
Yeah, I'd actually misannounced this, by the way. I don't know if anybody caught that. Like when I announced that we were getting these, I had said reroll hits, wounds, and saves of 1. And it's hits to shooting, hits to melee, and saves of 1. So there's not reroll 1s to wound. Go on. We're listening. We can wait.
Sorry, I hope that wasn't on like loud.
Oh, it totally was. As I said, go on. We can wait.
I have no way to mute my phone when I'm on this like easily. Sorry, everybody. I really am. But like, I could not stop that sneeze, and my nose was running like crazy. I am very sorry, everyone. At any rate, you were saying, Tom, yes, because you had said originally reroll hit, reroll wound, and that's not what it is, right?
Yep.
Yes, I don't have a way to mute my phone easily because the little holder it's on blocks the mute button, and if I hit it, it'll shut me off. Like if I have to. So this is just the life we live here, guys. I am sorry.
I just love when I'm not the one failing at the internet. Woo!
Yeah. Well, look, I have allergies. I'm sorry. Okay, and I would normally obviously try to mute that, but yes, situation. I am sorry. Okay, here we go. So now we have these 3 new command abilities: all out attack, all out defense, and volley fire, right?
Yep.
Which are all structured more or less exactly the same. which is within 12 of a hero or 18 of a general, wholly within, right? You can either reroll ones to hit in melee, ones to, and all of them are at the start of the relevant phase, right? So all attack is at the start of the combat phase, all out defense at the start of the combat phase, and volley fires at the start of the shooting phase. And if you do so, you get to pick either and reroll ones to hit in melee, ones to hit in shooting, or ones to save.
Yep.
Okay.
I like it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Like, I see that, and I'm just like, Haradrim Overlords, I miss you.
Well, shout out to Gary P, who took, what, 6th place at Heat 3 with KO?
Yeah, he had a bad ball.
Pre-points changes?
Terry Pike, he drew a thrice befoulment in round 4, like 60 plague bearers. And rumor has it that that Terry Pike's on his 2 Guo saved, like, out of the 60 wounds that Gary put on him, he like 5-up saved 45 of the 60. And Gary,
that's some hot dice,
right? That's exactly right. So like, yeah, like it was stacked against him from the beginning, and then hot dice rolling. Like, poor guy, he just didn't have a chance.
Yeah, there's a couple interesting things about these new command abilities that are worth pointing out.
Yep.
Which are, as Sean pointed out in the comments, these all are longer range than the existing ones, right? Because the existing ones were basically like 6-12. These are 12-18, right? The 18 being obviously if it's the general, the longer range that comes off the general. The other thing to note is obviously these are all only until the end of that phase, right?
Right.
And I mean, not that the other ones are different, but just it is important to note. It's also important to note that their triggers are only in the relevant phase. Like I mentioned this, but this is important to understand. Because if you're in an army that can shoot or fight in the hero phase or something like that in a weird phase, you cannot access this command ability during that phase.
Right.
Right.
And likewise, you can't get the reroll ones to save in those phases.
That's exactly right. Yep. So like if you're playing your new Iron Jaws and you Mighty Destroyers and fight in the hero phase, which is awesome, cool, but you can't use all out attack to get rerolls of ones for that unit in the hero phase, right? You can only use it in the actual combat phase. So just a small note, but it's a really important note to sort of understand, right? Because otherwise, people will try to activate these things in the wrong phase. So. Yeah, cool stuff. I like these. Pretty basic. Nice ability to give, some buffs to armies that don't have good command abilities or stuff like that in actual relevant combat phases. So, cool.
Yeah, I see that stuff. And, like, man, like, it sends me back to playing my mixed order. Because, like, my mixed order, like, I had no command abilities and in that army, and I would, like, start and end the game. And I gained, like, battle shock immunity.
Right.
From my command trait. So, like, I would start and end the game without spending anything most of the time. And so, like, seeing stuff like this, I'm like, oh, there might be something there.
Yeah, just like the additional, you would just tick up command points. It's not like you just remembered to move a die up one number every round.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Sure.
Now I have something to spend on.
So shall we talk new scenarios, Tom? New scenarios.
Sure.
So some of these are, obviously these are the 12 scenarios here. The core missions still stay the same. You should note that in the GHB, obviously they do have a big table to let you roll these out. They do talk about that GHB 18 ones still remain, optionally inclusive at sort of like TO or your discretion, depending on where you're playing. And the 6 that are still in there are like the original 6 core didn't update here, right? So these are only the 12 that were in GHB 18.
Right.
So there's a couple interesting changes. So when you look at something like Knife to the Heart, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love new deployment on it.
Yeah. So talk about Knife to the Heart and why you like it so much, because it is very interesting.
Yeah. So they did a diagonal deployment on it. And it actually like closes the distance pretty significantly for like how far you have to travel to push on the point.
and it creates a much more interesting backfield in that environment as well. So for those that have extreme mobility units, it really gives some interesting mobility options.
Yeah, I also like the placement of the objectives, right? Yeah. At sort of 24 out horizontally and like 12 down or whatever, vertically, whatever you want to say. I don't know. You know, they're kind of farther out, right? Is basically the point. Yeah, I agree. Like it's a very small change. I think it could still very much be something that often results in minors instead of majors. But I think they did make it a bit more gradual. Like that is to say, I think you'll see more majors on this one than you used to between the deployment change and this one.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Total Conquest. This one's interesting because you just set up wholly within your territory. It's sort of a diagonal style deployment, right?
Right.
But like your territory is very shrunk. There's a big like no man's land in the middle, effectively, right?
Right.
And 4 objectives. They're 18 lengthwise out and 12 down, which puts 2 of them outside of your deployment zone because of the diagonal deployment.
Right.
And still the same thing where you get the extra VP if you take one over from somebody else. And yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I like it. I like, in general, like I like the design direction of these objectives, like the way that they've changed how objective play is, and the way that they've changed how the table formatting is. I think that it's going to create some more interesting and dynamic placements, and I think that you see that with like this scenario, for example. It also creates some real problems for placing like racial terrain, like even without their rules, because there's not like you don't have a big starting zone here, right?
Right. You do not know. I mean, the thin side of the diagonal is really thin.
Right. So.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Next up, Duality of Death, which had, I think, like, holy Moses, did this one change? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So first off, on Duality, you do not have a unified deployment zone anymore, right? Yeah, so you have 2 little territories that are like 2 foot by 1 foot, basically, right? So like if you think of the board in a bunch of like 1 foot blocks, you kind of have these 2 foot, like at each corner, right? Is basically what you get, and you can't deploy in the middle.
Yep.
Right. Which is interesting. So there's like 24 inches of dead space in the middle of your board. The 2 objectives are kind of out there in the middle of no man's land, pretty much where they were before. 18 inches in off the side, more or less the same. So still quite a distance between them.
Yep.
And obviously, Duality of Death was famously like the hero sort of scenario. But now that objective is controlled by a hero or battle line unit if ending any type of move except a retreat within 3 inches. Yep. And that objective is lost if that controlling hero or battle line unit is destroyed or ends its move more than 3 inches from the objective. And blah, blah, blah. From there, as you pointed out very early on your first read, they did miss a trick with this. In that if a battle line unit or somebody like gets on the objective and controls it and is then like removed from the table in some way through a setup as opposed to a move, they don't technically lose control of it. So like if you can put somebody, say, back up in the heavens or back off the table in some fashion, like the dwarven pick comes to mind in Dispossessed, where you could have like warriors claim it who are battle line and then like pick them off the table, and for that whole turn you control it unopposed, like nobody can take it from you.
We're out. And then you set them up anywhere on the table that you want, and they're still in control of it all, as long as they don't move.
Right. Which is funny.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, so expect that to get FAQ'd. But yeah, what do you think of this switching over to being battle line also being one of the options?
I love it so much because it moves the actual number of heroes that you need to have for scenarios down from like 2 to 3 scenarios down to like 1 to 2. because it changes the math on the number of scenarios that are going to show up like that, and I love that. Like, I play a lot of armies that have like low wound heroes,
right?
So I don't have people that are like hyper tanky to hold those places, but I do have a block of 30 Hearthguard Berserkers I can shove out on one of those points.
Sure.
And if Battle Line are going to do the job, I'll take it.
All right. So let's talk about Battle for the Pass. Another very interesting change on this one. So do you know this one off the top of your head? The change on this one?
No, I don't. Let me pull it up.
That's okay. Sorry. You're okay. I'll talk about it for a minute. So it's vertical deployment now, long way, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
But it's not your standard.
It's like the bow tie. It's the bow tie deployment.
It's the bow tie deployment, yeah. So instead of just being standard, like, you have this much on both sides of the board, it's like a triangle.
Yep.
And the tip of the triangle basically contains, this is still, Battle for the Pass is still the 4 objectives.
Yep.
Yeah, right? But like these 2 are like in the tip of your deployment zone where you really cannot fit a lot around them, right? And the other 2 are out in the middle. I
don't agree with that, but what I will say is that everything that you would fit around it in the front are things you're going to want to move off onto other objectives because of how the alignment is.
Yeah, there's not a huge amount of space. My point is you can't like have a big part of your army necessarily out there in a big line, but you could still chaff it and support it. Sure. I'm not saying it's impossible. Like, it's not at the very, very tippy top of the triangle, but it's just an interesting restriction, right? Because it does force a lot more of your army into the backfield. Yeah. The reality is a lot more of your stuff is just going to naturally start farther back, right? Yep. It becomes harder, depending on the movement capabilities of your army, it becomes harder to just like run out or sweep out and take the middle 2 objectives.
Right.
Because you could normally just, kind of come in from the sides or whatever. So, yeah, the bow tie I thought was like a clever solution to this.
Yeah, so, I wonder how often it's going to get played just because of the, again, the spacing restrictions at events.
Sure. Yeah, this one's an interesting one. Like, it's tough. It's that lengthwise deployment that's always tough at tourneys, right? I mean, that's the reality of the thing.
Yep.
All right. Next up, Star Strike. Holy Moses. Okay. So let's talk about Star Strike.
I love these changes.
Sure. So it's a standard setup, 12-inch off the line horizontal deployment, right? Just literally the most stock of stock standard things, right? Yep. But most notably, there are 3 objectives that become in play here. They're not there at the start of the game. That's per usual for Star Strike.
Yep.
But instead of sort of the old way where it was kind of, it was pretty limited, where it could come down like the middle one had sort of 3 points and, you're rolling a D3 and then yours had 3 points and theirs had 3 points. It was kind of, you really could sort of understand the general nature of about where one was going to be. You could almost stand there ready to catch it, right?
Right. As long as you had a unit in the vicinity of the various, like, 3 points, it would grab it. Yep.
Right. So now, instead, there's, like, these slicey, like, almost like a picket fence lines, right?
Yep.
That represent 2d6. And when you roll 2d6, and that's where you set it up, which has lots of interesting effects, right? Because it's moved off of when it's a D3, each side is equally likely, right?
Yeah.
But
now it norms the middle.
Right. Like literally there is a bell curve
on
the map, right?
Yeah, which like for horde armies, for like larger horde armies, this is actually beneficial because it lets you stack in the middle where before you couldn't.
Yes. Sure. Yeah. Although then the funny side is going to happen is what happens when you suddenly accidentally roll the 11 or the 12 or the 2 or the 3.
Right. Well, and what I'm saying is that it allows you to say that, like, to move things so that you can, like, largely, like, centralize. And then if you need to then range out, you can do that. But, like, statistically, you're going to be in that middle deviation.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. So it was just a really interesting change to me because of, sort of what it ends up meaning to the way it does curve out.
Totally. Yeah.
Scorched Earth. Oh boy, does this one have another big change. So vertical lengthwise deployment. This is one that I kind of hope does get played in tournaments, even though it's got the lengthwise deployment.
Yeah.
Because I really like it. It's a 9-inch off the line setup, so it's one of those very close setups, right? And there are eight objectives, right? Eight.
Yeah, I like it's really forced me to think long and hard on my dwarves about like what this looks like. Like this is a really hard one to play for Fire Slayers because if I put any units in the back to hold those objectives, they will never get to the other side of the table.
Sure.
Like on the map, they can't get over there.
Yeah, you're way deep in the backfield with this.
Yep.
Right,
Like
especially given the closer starting line.
Yeah. Yep. You're 24 inches off their terrain or their line, their territory line. Like it's so significant. And I don't think that people have really like come to terms with how deep those objectives are, especially for slower armies. Like it's a really big deal.
I hope you brought Lunchbox the Bringy Dingy. Let me just say that because you're gonna need to get on over there. The boatman's working extra hard. But yeah, I think this one's really interesting. Obviously, it still has the like you get a victory point per turn, you control them, and you can burn them for D3. Cool, and you remove the objective, and you can't burn them until round 2, right? So okay, it does raise the question of like, if you are that army, do you just keep like a nominal chaff unit or something back there? Have something back there that you can then just burn and run, right? And like round 2, as soon as you can, you just burn and run.
Yeah, I mean your best bet would have like a highly mobile ranged unit on one or both that you can just like burn and then push forward, with stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I'm like it's messing with my list design. Let me just say that.
Sure. All right, number 7, and all the Stormcast players in the audience go woo. Total Commitment still in the pack. So, it's a diagonal deployment set up 9 inches off the line. So again, it's one of the close ones. And of course, still no reserves, nothing off the table. Everything has to be set up. Suck it.
Stormcaster like, well, looks like Vanguard chamber for us.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's still got the 4 objectives. They're very much near the edge of the board, right? Being like only 6 inches basically from each edge.
Yep.
Right. They're very close to the edge of the board. Yeah, it's
talk about it.
My ultimate feeling on Total Commitment, I think, is that this is one of those ones I've had a change of heart on, to be completely honest. Okay.
You liked it before and you don't like it now.
I really liked it before. Yeah, I thought it was interesting because it did take away a very interesting element that armies can sometimes skew toward, which is like, which is sort of this off-board deployment. Yeah, this null deployment type of setting, right?
Yep.
What I've come to see is that it doesn't do much except hurt armies and like very particular armies in really, really crippling ways. Like it's too strongly crippling of basically a couple armies, most of their allegiance abilities, right?
Like who?
Like Stormcast. Like Stormcast is my example, right? Like they don't have a lot else going on besides the lightning strike deployment.
Right.
And this kind of just shuts that off, and it's like, oh. And most other people don't have to deal with that, right? Like there's no scenario where it's just like your maximum move is 8 inches or something like that, right?
Sure,
so like,
sure.
If you're a fast army that runs around, you just don't get that anymore. Like that doesn't exist, right? Or like if your
maximum range on spells is 12 inches.
Let's say you're Nurgle and you rely on like a lot of demonic, feel no pain saves, right?
Yeah.
There's no scenario that's just like those don't exist. It's just you only get armor saves.
No after saves this game.
Yeah, like there's just I think Halo Twitch had a really nice.
He had a wonderful post on it. Yeah.
Yeah, he gave like example abilities of how you would kneecap other armies in the same way, and those just don't exist. And so I'm not sure why this one does, because I'm not sure these ambush armies are really like a skew problem we need to directly address through a scenario. Right. So like I think my argument would be this is kind of like a good fail-safe to have around in case that ever becomes a problem. But for the most part, I would push for TOs not to include this in their packs. Would be my argument, right? So like if we ever got to the point where that kind of like ambushing stuff got nonsensical, it'd be great to have a scenario like this to kind of rein it in, right?
Right.
But that's not what it's doing right now. That's not the problem. There's so many other different problems, and this isn't one of them. Things like, eel charge. Eels don't care. They just set up and just run across the board because they move a bajillion inches, right?
Yeah, they just push forward
like,
22 inches in charge.
Yeah, like exactly. Like who gives a hoot? So my argument would be let's just leave it out. Let's just pretend. Let's just TOs. Let's all get together and say, in general, let's stop punishing Stormcast. Like they're fine. It's cool. Great. But we can keep it around in our back pocket until a time it is needed again. All right. Focal points. Focal points obviously are 5-point setup, on the X in the middle. Again, horizontal deployment, 9 inches off the line. It's fine. Didn't change really that much.
It's fine. I like it.
Yep.
I like what it's doing.
So the better part of Valor. Yeah, this one's interesting now. So vertical deployment, long way. You set up 9 inches off the line. The objectives are now behind you because of that.
Right.
Right. They're clearly behind you. The objectives, because the objectives are 12 inches off of the center line.
Right.
So they're 3 inches behind your deployable space. And that's kind of the change. And that's basically it, right? Like
Well, ultimately the objectives are more condensed because before
and they can't be burned round one. Sorry, the objectives can't be burned round one. I should say.
Well, and they were across a 72-inch board edge, and now they're across a 48 board edge, so they're actually tighter.
Right. Yep. Another really good point. Yeah.
So the actual space of engagement is much smaller than it was, which I think is significant. Like that's not an insignificant change. Because it for horde armies, they can gum up the board in a way that you just can't get around their bodies. I think about siege or stuff like that. Like these types of scenarios that are functionally creating choke points because they're using the shorter edge of the board.
Yeah, it becomes a lot easier to block off so that people can't just get in there and burn your objectives. It changes a lot.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
I like it.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a good change. I have to think about this one overall. I've always really liked the better part of Valor. Like that is to say, I always thought it was a really good idea. I just thought its implementation was kind of off. You know what I mean?
I didn't like it just because it created non-games against
and that's what I didn't like. That's what I'm saying. I think its implementation was wrong. Like what I'm saying is the idea good, execution not so good, right? And I think this solved most of my concerns, but I'm not sure yet. You know what I mean? Like I need to play this one a few times and really to get a better sense of it. I think it addressed them, but
I can see that.
Some of these you got to kind of, again, it's one of those whole things of you could know the desert's hot all day but there's a difference between knowing the desert's hot and walking in the desert for a day without water, right?
Yep.
All right, shifting objectives. All right, so you set up wholly within your territory, which is basically a 12-inch line, 3 objectives, they shift. Like that's to say, you roll a D3 and one's primary and the primary one's worth more.
Yeah.
Cool. Horizontal deployment.
Yeah, they basically just moved in the scenario from the team's play.
Yep. All right, now we get to one that has a big change. Big change. Places of arcane power, right?
Yep.
Diagonal deployment, 12 inches off the line, 3 objectives.
Yep.
Same. That is to say the 3 objectives are the same. Distance between is the same. And now the objective is controlled by a hero if ending any type of a move except a retreat. What's notable about that, Tom? What changed about Places of Arcane Power that's such a big deal?
You don't need an item.
You don't need an item or to be a wizard anymore. Yep. Yep. So that's
I'm so
a
excited.
big deal. Yeah, absolutely.
Like
We kind of moved all of them down a step, right? Like Place of Arcane Power went from just like magical heroes to like any hero, and Duality of Death went from just heroes to heroes and battle lines. So we were kind of easing that curve off, right?
What I'll say is this: as a dwarf player, I like all these changes because it was so crippling for me, honestly. Because like it meant that I had to run a battalion, and I had to actually run. Have a battalion, and I had to run a wizard.
Right.
And now I have more flexibility in list building.
Sure. It also is more interesting for stuff like the nature of old Places of Arcane Power made it so like certain special characters that weren't wizards were just naturally worse.
Yeah.
Right. Because there was just even though they might have had named items on their profile, like take Gordrak or somebody, right, who has like 2 named artifacts on his profile, but yet those don't count as artifacts of power. So you just stared at those things and couldn't do anything with them.
How difficult would it be just to add a sentence, right? Like a single line
that says like this counts as an artifact of
This
power.
this counts as an artifact of power for purposes of scenarios and rules.
Sure.
Like how not difficult would that be?
Well, I'm not sure it matters a super amount anymore, but hey,
no, you're right. It doesn't. Like they wrote it out of the scenarios,
right?
But like when it was, boy, like it now would have been the time in rewriting all the rules to adjust it.
Sure. All right, and finally, the big show, number 12, the relocation orb. I love how like
the new cross stitch pattern.
Yeah, exactly. It went from like the gritty grid pattern of sort of movement that melted everybody's brain to like this. What do they call the loop? What's the loopy thing that loops in
the
on
infinity
itself?
loop? Like
no,
it's not Nimbus.
I don't know. Tony Stark figures out what an end game, and that's how he solves time travel. I don't know, but anyway, the point is that now it kind of looks like that. And so it's a little loop-de-loop. And the places the orb can move are sort of, I think very easily readable on the new map. I like the new map with its little swirly, twirly lines.
You know what I don't like about this?
I'm ready.
Measuring for those positions in scenario when you roll that.
Sure.
Because they're not intuitive spots on the battlefield.
They are not. And why are there not just like the vertical arrows that show where they are? Now, here's what I'll say. Okay. There are little hashes on the map
I
show you like the particular 24.
Like I know the center point is the center point of all.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I get it.
Great. The other looks like it's on the 24-inch line and some amount of distance.
Right. Yeah, there's like the problem with it is there's one
dimension
missing. Yeah, there's one dimension missing on all of them. Yeah. No, I agree.
It's just so terrible.
Like, again, I like the swirly twirly lines, but I feel like we could have just had another couple measurements in there and that would have been better. But hey.
It feels like we have to mark these out and just leave markers there for this, like for the duration as stuff moves around. So you're not having to literally remeasure all these points every time it moves.
By the way, the answer, thank you, Brian was the first one to get it. And Mobius strip, yes, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, so, right. So now there's some other relevant things about relocation orb we should discuss real quick. In addition to having its new sort of movement changed and going into its swirly twirly movement, where basically it has kind of 6 positions it can sit in realistically. Right.
And it doesn't jump. Like it doesn't like it won't bounce the whole battlefield like it occasionally would, like on these weird statistical anomalous results. Right.
So with this one now, the other important thing to understand here is, you've got like a diagonal style deployment with all of its movement potential in the middle. Like none of its none of its potential movement is actually in a player territory, right?
Right.
And it still retains the when determining control of an objective, each hero with an artifact or wizard within 3 inches counts as 20 models. But again, they do count as more, but they're not required. You can take it with any normal models, right? If you have one normal model and there's no enemies around,
right,
they get it. One free guild guard guy will take it if there's nobody else around, right? So that's fine.
Right. You just have to kill all the enemies. That's the answer.
Oh, as always. So yeah, there you go. I mean, all in all, what do you think of the new scenarios? Pretty happy overall?
I am. I don't like the like end-to-end ones for tournament play, just because of the spatial limitations. But I love, as Paul pointed out, that that you don't have to run the current ones. If you run the prior ones, you'll have, like they're set in the other alignment, and I love that. So I'm actually, after Paul pointed that out, I'm super happy with that. So that's where I'm at. I like it.
I figured out how to mute on my headset.
I see that.
Yay. Also, I want to shout out to Gio, who in the comments said, but you need to be a wizard to find out where to place the objectives. Which is a great comment and answer to that.
Indeed. And he's right.
All right. Okay. So, so Joel Graham says, okay, but now I have to carry around my GHB 1819 core rules and army book. Too much.
Yes.
No, because I don't think you don't need the 18 unless you're necessarily going to a tournament that has them. And if you're that's using them, and if you're going to a tournament that's using those, I've never encountered a tournament pack that didn't explain the scenario.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. They don't say see book. They almost always actually reproduce it in the pack itself. At least to the events in the US.
And so, if you're using your GHB 19, like I will be for my Iron Jaws rules,
sure,
then that's fine. The core rules thing, I don't know. I just carry around the little 12-page pack thing. I don't bring that whole book around. There's a little thin book you get in 100 different things, and it's just it's all the core rules on a little 12-page thing. So that's fine. And then I have my army book. I don't know. I certainly am very sensitive to it, and I don't want to see us go down the 40K road. I'm not sure we're there, at this point, but exactly 40K, you could easily show up with 7 books. You better bring a whole backpack just for your books.
Well, what I'll say is this: I could really do with taking some of the pertinent information from some of the books and turning them into cards.
The lacking issue is not what we just said. The problem is if they're using realms as well, and you got malign sorcery crap, right? That's where the actual challenge comes in. Right. So what I want is just realm rules and realm spell cards, and just that kind of stuff. Where I have a double-sided card that's all the rules for the realm on one side and the additional spell lore on the back side, and and the artifacts, and call it a day. You know what I mean? That would be. I would buy that pack in a heartbeat. Yeah, I know they exist out there. It's people have sort of handmade them as. Yeah, but that's the only thing that lacks. Again, by the way, every tournament I've ever been to that uses realm rules, the realm rules are reproduced in the pack as well. So, I don't know. But at any rate, that to me, that's where I start to agree. When you have to have all that nonsense with you, that's where it gets problematic, right? Yeah. But anyway, who uses physical books? Everything's on my phone. What's going on, folks? No, I mean, but yes, a nice little double-sided card would be great. All right, so with that stuff out of the way, Tom, would you like to talk about a couple fun narrative things / narrative match play, whatever?
I would love to.
All right,
so
buddy.
Excited, please.
As am I. Let's talk about Streets of Death, my man. So, this is not a thing we were just going to skip by. I don't know if people expected us to cover this, but I have been super excited about this since they announced it, and I plan to use this in every game I play at home because it's awesome. I love this stuff, and personally, I would encourage people to start using this stuff in their home games. Why not? It's super cool. and fun, and makes your games more interesting and fun at home. So there you go. Like, I don't know that most of this stuff is like tournament ready, but not every game you play has to be practice for a tournament. Sometimes you can actually just have fun games. That's a valid choice. So Streets of Death. Streets of Death is very Mordheim-esque, very Mordheim what we designed-esque, right?
Like,
where you can burn buildings down and blow up buildings, and demolish things, and all the fun rules that we had added in there.
I read this as like a love letter to our like fan-made project 4 years ago, because like it smacks of like what we were trying to do. Like when we wanted to create that skirmish level, like we were like, okay, you can knock down buildings. What does that look like? Okay, roll dice, do wounds. You know, it'll get like a feel no pain check, and then after it accumulates so many wounds, it falls down. It does mortal wounds to everything in the area or those inside. Done. Hey, look at that. You know, like, what do I want to do? I want to set buildings on fire so they're no longer here before. What do I have to do for that? Okay, make this, do that, mortal wounds, done. And I'm like, yes. I love that it's in a book now officially. Like, and that's
exactly.
Point to that, yeah.
Yeah, and like blowing up buildings and lighting them on fire is super cool. Not in real life. Don't do that. I'm not encouraging arson. But in the game, it's super fun. So, yes, Streets of Death is obviously meant to be like you pack the board full of terrain, most of which are buildings or ruins or something like that, and you can interact with them. So you get rules for like demolitions, where you can attack buildings. But the interesting part here is that I thought this was an interesting way to cut it. Buildings can only be damaged by attacks that have a 2 wound characteristic of 2+ or 3+.
Yeah, I thought that was it was an ingenious move.
Yeah. And abilities that inflict mortal wounds, obviously. Basically, you target them in the same way you would target an enemy unit, right? So it has to be within range and all that kind of stuff. And the building has a 3+ feel no pain. And if the building takes 6 wounds total, like after its 3-up feel no pain, damage negation, it collapses, right? It's demolished. You remove the collapsed building from the battlefield. The area the building occupied is treated as an obstacle, which you can mark with suitable scenery if you wish, like replacing it with ruins. And each garrisoning unit must be set up wholly within the area the building occupied, and then suffers D6 mortal wounds. Woof. Boom. One of the things we had that I think would be a neat addition to this was we had the idea of like hardened buildings, right? So to cut a difference between like your average tower, your average
like
tavern
fortified
and,
things,
and a fortified thing. And I think the way you would do that is you would just make it 12 wounds instead of 6. Right?
Yeah.
So if you want some buildings that are harder to knock down, if you feel like 6 wounds might be too easy in some cases, then
it's an easy house rule.
Easy house rule to just say these are fortified buildings and they all have 12 wounds instead, right? So yeah, that's super cool. And then the next rule you get access to is Firestorm, which is you can attempt to set a building on fire if you're within 6 inches of that building. Units armed with bows of any kind can instead attempt to set a building on fire if it's in range of their bows, because it's assuming they're shooting flaming arrows, which is cool. And it's a special type of shooting attack called a Firestorm attack. The unit cannot make any other type of attack in the same phase that it makes a Firestorm check. So basically you're trying to light the building up, right? So which is cool. And I'm trying to go to my next rules page since I have all these loaded. There we go. All right. If a unit makes a Firestorm attack, you roll 3d6 and compare the roll to the number of models from the attacking unit that are within range of the building. If the dice roll exceeds the number of attacking models within range, the attack has no effect. If the dice roll is less than or equal to the number of attacking models within range, then the building is set on fire. And you mark it with a suitable burning marker to indicate this. And basically then, now that it's on fire, you sort of roll a progression for it, right?
I would assume that means in our Warlord boxes, we're going to get burning markers.
Sure. So you get like guttering flame where it basically goes out, right? Because it lit, but it didn't stick. And then there's sort of different things that can happen.
Right.
And one of the things that can happen that I love, which is so great. Obviously, people who are in the building, by the way, suffer mortal wounds if the building is on fire. I don't feel like I should need to say that, but it's pretty obvious, which is great. The fire also causes demolition damage, right? Builds it toward its 6 wound track.
Yep.
And when you roll a 6 on this sort of damage track, you have to roll for every other building within 6 inches of that building.
Sure.
And on a 4 up, that building also starts on fire, which I'm all about that. Like, I love that idea. Tom, you and I, we had like one of my favorite missions we created in the Mordheim thing was like this powder keg one, where you had to pick certain buildings on on the playboard that were storing gunpowder and explosives, and they could blow up like this and set other buildings alight. And it was so much fun. It was so much freaking fun. So I just love the idea of buildings going up and blowing up and all that kind of stuff, that's spreading. I think that's just the coolest thing. So yeah, great. There's some simple rules for like narrow streets, where like you can mark certain areas as narrow streets, and if you do so, like monsters or mounted models that run or charge can suffer mortal wounds when they go through it. Okay, cool, fine. And then sewers. So you have access to sewers. Instead of setting up a unit on the battlefield, you can place if you're using sewers, you can place up to 3 units to one side and say they're set up in the sewers as reserve. Only units with a wounds characteristic of 6 or less and that do not have a mount can be set up in this manner. After setup is complete, but before the battle begins, if either player has set up any units in the sewers, each player must set up D3 sewer entrance markers on the battlefield. And then basically you can come up from the sewer markers, right?
Yep.
And you got to be more than 9 inches away from enemy units. And the sewer marker has to be more than 3 inches from any buildings, objectives, or enemy units, which I think is very funny. Like, you can't put sewers in buildings. Right? So, yeah. And, other than that, it's pretty normal set of stuff, right? Like, you set up your reserve unit wholly within 6 of the sewer entrance, 9 from the enemies. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's one more fun thing I should mention about the sewers. Sorry, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this one. If you both put stuff in the sewers, okay, at the start of your combat phase, you get to pick one friendly reserve unit in the sewers and one enemy reserve unit in the sewers and say that they have encountered each other underground. So, like, on your turn, right, you each get to do this. Right,
you
like
get to
say if it's your combat phase, I get to pick one unit to fight and pick one of yours. In your combat phase, you'll get to pick one and fight one of mine. And if you do so, roll a die. On a 1, the friendly unit you pick suffers D6 mortal wounds. On a 2 to 3, both units you pick suffer D3 mortal wounds. And on a 4+, the enemy unit you pick suffers D6 mortal wounds. So it lets you resolve like an interesting quick combat, though, right?
A skirmish combat, if you will.
Yeah, a little sewer skirmish. I just think that's such a fun little addition, and I like that they didn't, because they could have said you just pick a unit and they fight, like in that, and then that would have been this like
weird
long resolution thing of like you fighting and how many units are in combat and what does that actually mean and blah 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 blah. Right. They didn't go down that road though, right? They made the smart choice and just said like, cool, roll a die and a little skirmish happens, and then the units kind of flee back into their separate areas of the sewers. And there you go. So, yeah, very nice. There's some attacker and defender rules for stuff like barricades and things like that. They're fine. I mean, it's cool. The barricade stuff is all fine. I don't know that it's like incredibly impactful. It's fine enough.
It does what it needs to do.
Yeah, and same with like there's sort of a bricks and stones, like a walls thing. There's hidden defenders. Like when you start to use the attacker and defender stuff, as these Mordheim scenarios often traditionally had, you get kind of these other things that can happen. They're all fine. I'm not sure I would use that normally because like a lot of that stuff is more dependent on the attacker defender thing. So it's a little harder to sort of import into a standard match play game, as it were. But in my mind, everything we just talked about with like burning buildings and stuff, you could do in a fun match play game. I don't know that I would do it in an organized game. Like it's probably, I don't know. You could probably structure a tournament around it and integrate it in some smart way, I'm sure.
I don't know,
but
I think it could be a sport, Steve Herner.
Indeed, yeah, indeed. Do you know how many times I've wanted to burn down some of the buildings on Steve's tables? So I'm all about it.
Oh, indeed. Like I could see doing like, not that I want to kill Steve, like there being a full ruined city board.
Yeah.
Like Haight
Yeah,
Street.
yeah.
Like, oh, the ruins
So
of Alexia or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, I like everything about Streets of Death. I think this is super cool. I wanted to go through it because I hope people give it a shot in their games. Like, load up that table with more terrain and go nuts, right? Like, play around with some of these rules, have some fun. It's kind of seems like a really fun thing to try out. Just a quick other thing I wanted to mention from this narrative section that I actually thought was really interesting, and again could have some fun play, especially in like maybe your basement game, maybe not a tournament, but certainly in a basement game, was the arcane objectives. Did you read over this one?
I did.
I really like this. So the arcane objectives is like an objective is just an objective, right? The way we play it. Like it's a sort of just, it is a game element. It doesn't have anything distinct about it. We don't actually know what it is, why we care about this random spot on the battlefield, right?
Right.
The arcane objectives thing gives you a way to sort of like give some narrative weight to what those objectives are. And again, this is the kind of thing that I could see. Like, I'm not sure I want to roll this out in like, something with 8 objectives, but
right.
Just because I don't know that I want to keep track of all of it. But if there's 2 or 3, sure.
Let me say this. I think we are really ripe for doing, like, I think we are on the verge of having a really interesting set of rules in place to do narrative storytelling and campaigns on a more robust level. Like, I think that GW is just one like writing project away from producing a really interesting setup.
Agreed. There's so many good elements they've done over the past couple of GHBs that you could bring in and weave together. I agree. What this one does is sort of, it gives you like a 2d6 table. So again, it is 2d6, so it forces toward the middle. And the 7, the most common result, is basically like no additional rules apply to that objective. Right. But everything else, the objective isn't just a spot on the battlefield or a token, it's something special. Right. And there's a lot of different things you can roll for, with like the 2 and the 12 being pretty insane for what they do. But obviously they're on a 2 and 12, so it's not very, normal you would sort of roll them. But just a lot of interesting things going on, like Hollowed Tomb and the Iconoclast Axe, where like this objective is counted as being 2 objectives to the army that controls it if the army has an Order or Death General in the first one and Chaos or Destruction in the other one. There's things that can heal, particular models. There's things that you can have the objective be trapped to where the first time you take control of them, they cause mortal wounds. Just a lot of little fun things that I think are again, a cool addition to the game. It's something I'm not sure I'd really want to, that I really want to worry about in a tournament game where I probably already have like a million things on my mind.
Right.
That's probably a bridge too far. Like, I think tournament games are already complex enough. But if I'm playing in my basement, sure.
Yeah,
I'll give those a shot.
What I would say is that I think that there would be value in revisiting a like Firestorm style release.
Yeah.
Like
perhaps a really completely planned out one. Yes.
Yeah, like a more robust version of that like changes the map campaign a little bit. Like, I didn't like that anybody could engage anybody in any, I didn't like some of like how the map functioned, but like, man, you take some of those rules and tweak that and spin that with some of this other stuff and like the progressing artifacts and all of that. Like, and I think that you have like, there's some real gas in that engine.
I agree. Yep. I absolutely agree. Because you look at like some of the narrative scenarios that are there in the new thing with like fighting over the particular city. You look at some of the stuff that's there in like GHB 17 with like some of the Triumph and Treachery stuff that's in there, right? Like there's just so many different elements you can pull on for this. So I completely agree. All right. yeah, so Arcane objectives I think are pretty darn cool, and I hope people will give them a shot. All right, so then the last thing I want to talk about here, Tom, in this particular show, so we can wrap this up and then we'll call it a night, is mercenary companies, man. So here we got the expanded mercenary companies. The Dogs of War are back. Can I tell you that my least two favorite things are the things they put out in Forbidden Power? Is it just me, or do those feel the least thought out?
Define the least, like...
They're just big sections of the army with like a little bit of stuff that's not, you can't use. Right? Like the Greyfeared ones and the Tenebrous Court ones are just like, you can't use these things, but otherwise we just made these whole armies mercs.
Yeah, I could see that. Like,
they don't have the same narrative character that everything else has. And I don't know why. Like, why did we choose to make Fire Slayers and Flesh Eaters just these random generic mercenaries minus a few units?
Like, what I would say is that, like, Flesh Eaters make less sense to me. Fire Slayers definitely make sense to me. Like, I think that, like, that feels right, even for the whole army. Like,
yeah, sure.
Like, just because of what they are. Like, I can understand Rune Fathers, you know, aren't going to take contracts like that, but all the rest of it makes sense. Flesh Eaters, just, I really struggle with it, because, like, in my mind, you have a better bet having it be Skaven, right?
Sure.
Like,
I mean, they're both, like, cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers, but sure.
Sure, like, but I'm just saying from the lore, like, I just don't see it in Flesh Eater ports. Especially if they're imagining themselves as, like, noble knights, like, taking contracts.
Right,
like,
why are they taking contracts to kill?
Yeah,
well,
like,
I think the thing that lets me down about them is, like, again, yeah, I get it. Okay, so the Fire Slayers are mostly mercenaries, sure. But you're not really telling me about a particular mercenary company in the same way that it feels more specific, like the Grug Brothers or whatever.
Right.
Like, that has a lot of
It's an entire lodge. Like, it's an entire lodge, not, like, a small band led by, you know, Thulgrim the Betrayer or whatever.
Yeah, instead of Flesh Eaters, if we were going to go for something like that, I would have rather seen, if you were going to kind of open something up, I would have rather seen like a bunch of barbarian stuff. You know, we talked about that, right? Like, just
yeah, I can see a Dark Oath tribes. Yeah, like and there's some of that obviously, but I agree with you. That said, I mean, I do kind of like the Flesh Eater option. I'm not gonna lie. About 1.5 feet from me, I have all of the bits necessary to convert my Flesh Eater, you know, my version of Flesh Eaters for my Dwarf army.
By that, you mean like 2 Arch Regents?
I have my Archregent conversion. Sure. And no, like I wouldn't go that deep. But I have like my Cadaverous Wall for my wall build. And like all of the bits for my my 20 ghouls that I'm gonna summon on with him, but they're not gonna be ghouls, they're gonna be robots. Because of course they are. With the tech with my tech stuff. So
sure, they're just cyber zombies. I've seen this before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, like, on the whole,
with towel heads.
Right. On the whole, I love mercenaries. Like, I think this is such a cool idea. It's just the 2 that were presented in Forbidden Power. And, like, by the way, I feel like they're relatively well-balanced overall. Like, I don't think they'll show up very often in competitive armies. I think they actually pulled an incredible trick here in that mercenaries are the most valuable to the weakest armies.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Like, if you're already a streamlined, potent allegiance ability army, let's say you're like Heed Knights or Skaven or somebody like that, right? Where your allegiance abilities are doing a lot. You are far less interested in mercenaries than somebody like BCR or Gutbusters or something like that, where they can actually use these things to gain access to stuff they otherwise wouldn't have. And they're not sacrificing much for those units.
I will say that it added this really interesting element that I didn't expect, which is that like the tangential like presence of like the necromancer in Nighthawk armies caught me off guard.
Sure.
Because it felt like it's suddenly like, no, that dude's just hanging out with a bunch of ghosts anyways. And like it's not a far stretch. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
And it's suddenly getting the army something it's desperately needed, which is the pile-in spell.
Yeah. And so, like, I really love these because, again, you know, I have a whole Dogs of War army. You know, I've classically been a big fan of the Dogs of War.
Yep.
And
my entire dwarf army is based on that concept. Long drawn slayers.
Yes, we're longtime fans of the dogs, and I still miss them. Gone but not forgotten. You know, pour one out for our homies. But this is like feels very much like that. Once you get past the sort of the fire slayers and the flesh eaters, which are like kind of narratively, who cares?
Hey, screw you! I love that everything that I'm painting right now for my fire slayers can go into any army now.
Well, congratulations, Tom. So basic coverage on this in matched play. These do use your ally points. They're basically like worse allies that can be drawn from a broader pool, right? Like they snap your first command point off. They don't count as battle line. They do count as everything else. Like they count against your limits. They can't be your general. The same 1 in 4 rule applies. Blah 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 blah.
They gain a special ability like a battalion-esque ability,
and that's all they gain because they don't benefit from any of your allegiance stuff or anything like that. And they will often be very often, but not always, depending on like kind of where you seated them, be non-synergistic with the rest of your army. The existing abilities and spells. Not always. There are exceptions, but like. If you just put 3 giants into your free people's army, there's not a lot of crossover with keywords there, is what I'm saying. Right?
Sure. But like the Necromancer force in Night Haunt is getting like all the summoning stuff, and it's also getting the plus from Corpse Cart, getting the +1 to cast for all the Night Haunt casters.
Yep. Yeah, that's why I said sometimes, but not always. Yes, the sort of the closer the alignment, you can often still sometimes have those bennies. So I agree. Let's just talk through these 8 real quick, and we'll just kind of do. So you're a big fan of the Sons of the Lich Master. The Sons of the Lich Master.
I think it's one of my favorite. I don't think it's the strongest. I think it's one of my favorite.
Sure, it has to have 1 necro. That's it. That could be it, right? Like right there, done. That could be the end of it. But it can also have 0-3 units of zombies or skeletons in any combination, and 0-1 Corpse Cart with the unholy lodestone. So it's the particular Corpse Cart, right? And basically, like the power of the Lich Master, you add 1 to the attacks characteristic of weapons used by zombies and skeletons when they're wholly within 18 of the Necromancer. So cool. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good one. Somebody had mentioned in the comments, and I totally agree. Like the conversion opportunities on these are off the charts.
Yep.
Right. So then you have the Order of the Blood-Drenched Rose, which is 0-1 vampire lords must be mounted on a nightmare steed, and 1-3 units of blood knights. So it's interesting because you don't have to have the hero. You like the unit of blood knights are heroic enough on their own that they could just be could be your thing.
It's funny. I would rather just have the vampire lord in like Legion of Grief since they can't have vampires. But what I will say is that I'll take the blood knights if I have to.
Yeah, sure. These guys have the worst special ability because it's just they're immune to battle shock. Being leadership 10 and only 5 models generally makes you immune to battle shock, but appreciated, I suppose. But it's fine. I mean, Blood Knights are super cool. They're probably still a little too high on points, but they're still super cool, and I dig them.
I think 200 feels about right.
Okay. I agree to disagree, but that's fine. I'm all right with that. I don't think they're wildly off. Hey, it makes those traditionally everybody used the Dragon Prince models for the Blood Knights.
Yeah.
Makes that a lot more impactful of a conversion. So there you go. The Grug Brothers.
At heads.
Yeah. The Grug Brothers. This is your 1-3 giants, and basically they get better rerolls to hit if they're all near each other. Fantastic. More giants. Now just please get rid of the dumb drunken stagger rule and/or fix it. And AOS becomes the perfect game. That's all. You thought it was a bunch of rules changes and stuff like that. It's not, Tom. It's not. None of that other stuff matters. All that matters is that we get rid of the giants fail 1/6 of their charges and suck and are terrible no matter what points you point them at rule. Get rid of that so that it's actually they can still fall down and make funny things happen just to let them complete the charge in some interesting way. And now the fact that any army in the game can take giants means AOS has reached perfection status. This is it. This is peak Warhammer right here. Anybody can take giants.
You know how you fix that? I have it.
I'm ready.
If you roll the doubles, their charge sequence is a little bit different. They declare who they are charging before they roll the dice.
Okay.
If they succeed, but they roll doubles, they complete the charge and they have to end in a legal spot, but your opponent moves them. Any units moved, they can move over other units. Any units moved over, or if any units that they end adjacent to, that takes a D3 wounds or something like that. And so basically what it does is it lets your opponent do the movement. As long as they complete the appropriate movement, but they'll damage people on the way as they're like tripping over people or damaging like your own
I still
troops.
don't like it, but okay. We can have we'll dedicate a whole show to how to fix the giant war scroll. That seems I could do 2 hours on that. All right. So I want to jump ahead here since Doom just raised a question in the army. Okay. Which is about the gut stuffers. We'll jump ahead to the gut stuffers.
Yep.
Which is at least min 1 fire belly and min 1 to 3 units of man eaters, right?
It's so sad.
And their special ability is that you can reroll charge rolls for units from the mercenary company. However, if a unit from this mercenary company is within 12 inches of the enemy at the start of its charge phase, it must attempt to charge, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
I tried. I really tried, guys. It just happened suddenly. So, yes, 3 giants is above 400 points, Doom.
But if you're in a 2,500
the answer here, sure, but you could take 2 giants. It's fine. The question here becomes, yes, you can fit 1 unit of man eaters and 1 fire belly in your 400 points as allies, assuming you had the 8 other units it required, right, or whatever. Because remember, you still have to fulfill the 1 and 4, right?
Yep.
And his question was, are they better than if I take them as allies? And my answer is they're different, right? Because yes, you get a special
value. Hey, how much do you value your command point?
Right. Exactly. Yep. So the reality is you can take them as mercs and you get that reroll charge ability, but you lose your command point. So that's your cost you're paying, right? Okay. Nimyard's Rough Riders. This one's a funny one. The required here is you've got to have at least 1 unit of Free Guild Pistoliers, but you can have up to 3. And then you have 0 to 1 units of Free Guild Outriders and 0 to 1 Free Guild General. Must be mounted on a warhorse and cannot have a stately war banner. And yeah, you're the Rough Riders, man. And instead of setting them up, you can basically you can ambush them. That's simple answer.
Yep.
Cool. I've always loved Pistoliers and Outriders. I don't think they're good, but it's cool shooting. It's cool ambushing and shooting. So that's kind of cool.
For some armies that need mobility and shooting, they're like, here's that thing you were looking for.
Yeah, I don't think it's the worst. That is to say, in some armies, I think that one could actually have some play as an interesting flanking unit, because the Pistoliers or the Outriders aren't that expensive. They're not cheap. I'm not sure they're worth their points, but my point is they could be worth their points if used in a force that didn't have that ability to pressure from a board edge and shoot and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
so it's kind of interesting what they would do.
Fire Slayers, which is not a highly mobile force, but this gives you mobile units that can pressure from board edges and that can shoot. 2 things the army is not doing.
Yep.
Nurgle would be another one.
Nurgle's a good one that comes to my mind, because if you're not running Gut Rot in the Blight Kings, right, this gives you I'm not sure is a great choice or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We could have a discussion about that. But this gives you an interesting shooting option and still allows you to keep the ambush pressure up. Okay. The Black Smoke Battery Mercenary Company. This is your guns. Guns for hire, quite literally. You have to have, it is at minimum 1 cannon and or organ gun, but up to 3 in any combination. And then you can also have 0 to 1 cogsmith and 0 to 1 gyrocopter or gyro bomber. That's right, buddy. The helicopters are out for hire. And you get to add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by cannons and organ guns if it's gyrocopter or gyro bomber from the same mercenary company is within 12 inches of the target.
Yeah, so they have the laser targeting mounts on these cannons.
Kind of cool. And I believe on the new points you can fit like 2 cannons and a gyrocopter in, right? Again, you'd have to have a lot of other units, but you can do it.
You're saying in a 2000 mat. Because again, the reason, like, these rules are still the same, by the way, folks, for 2,500 points, which means that you get 500 points of allies. And so, like, in that world, like, that's when you would maybe be able to fit 3.
Sure. It encourages sort of MSU style if you really want to push your number of mercenaries, right? Otherwise, like, you really do need to often keep in mind exactly how many units you have. Like, taking 2 units of mercs, I think a lot of armies will fit, but like 3 units of mercs, it depends. Lots of armies don't have 12 other units, right?
Right. Or 12 units total.
Or 12 units total, sorry. Yep. Okay. Rampagers Mercenary Company. This is 1 to 3 units of Chaos Marauders and 0 to 1 Dark Oath Chieftain.
I want to go on the record as saying that this is the most powerful of the mercenary units.
I completely agree with you. No disagreement. It sounds the weakest because it's just Marauders as being the required thing, and then if you want, like, the Dark Oath Chieftain or War Queen, which is basically a worthless model, right?
Yep.
But the special ability is on the Rampage. After you set up a unit from this mercenary company, you can move it D6 inches. I know why I think this is the best one. Why is this the best one, Tom? Because I completely agree with you. This is the best one.
2 reasons. Let me make sure the points are what I think they are. They're 40 for 200, right?
That sounds right off the top of my head. I don't have the
points. So it's twofold. One, you now have a pre-screening where you can push bodies forward, okay, and like take objectives and do all that. But more importantly is that you're getting 40 bodies for 200 points.
Yeah, because there's 60 base and 40 for 200, right? That's still the case for Marauders.
Yep. And so, I could just take 80 of these guys as my 400 points of allies and get bodies. And, like, just get meat to throw. Like, just have a meat, like, truly a meat screening shield.
Yeah, you're bringing out the meat wagon. You're serving up the meat. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just, like... Now that I think about it, like, a really amazing image of just doing like 80 like naked dudes in front of like a bunch of fire slayers, which are just naked dwarves. Just having the naked dude army.
Go first, Tom. That's the answer, right?
Yes, exactly. And just push all of the meat forward, all the beefcake.
All the beefcake, man. Send out the beef. No, I agree. Even if you're only taking these in 10s, the fact that you can have these.
You can't. You have to take them in 20s.
Or 20. Sorry, it's what 20 for 120, 40 for 200. There you go. Yeah, they're like clan rats. I forgot. Sorry. Even if you're only taking them in 20, either way, I still stand behind that, right? Even if you're only taking them in 20 for 120, like, this is how I use clan rats. A lot of people, when they look at clan rats, they go, "Why would you ever not take 40?" Well, the answer is because the difference between 120 and 200 actually matters a lot often, right? Like 80 points makes a difference. But having like a 20 model screen that I can care less about and that gets to like pre-move out there and kind of get in the way. Now, sure, sometimes you're going to roll an inch and sometimes you're going to roll 6 and whatever. But the fact that they get any kind of like pre-move to push out your screen is pretty great. Yes, there are bodies. They push out where the enemy can drop on you, alpha you, strike at you, right? Like they do so much good stuff cheaply.
And so for 400 points, literally it is 80 dudes. Like, think about this in like a Stormcast army.
Sure.
Just what, you need bodies? Like, who needs skinks?
And and like, again, so Jack in the comments mentioned, like, why is Chaos being hired by Stormcast.
They're not.
I don't know, man. The barbarians are, yeah. These guys like aren't all the way in, and moreover, like I don't know, because it's a big, crazy, insane mortal realms full of all sorts of unusual alliances and people that narratively explain getting together. Like one of my favorite sort of little narrative things was when Tom and I explained why my Iron Jaws were friends with his KO, right? And like because it's the story we told and it made sense. So like maybe the barbarians are on a path to redemption, but they're still marauders, but they're interested in trying to prove themselves as heroes. That they want to figure out who the greatest is amongst them so that hopefully Sigmar will take them up and reforge them as Stormcast. And they think the best way to do that is to like fight at the Stormcast side. Or maybe the Marauders are being pushed on by an outside force because Nagash is on the march and they're just barbarians in the end. They're not like great servants of the Chaos Gods. And the barbarians are like, well, I can either die and become an unfeeling sort of skeleton under the service of this, Nagash idiot forever, or I can have a temporary alliance with this, with these Stormcast. Or the Stormcast are hemmed in and desperate and in the middle of they're cut off from a realm gate or unable to be reinforced because of some magical twist of Tzeentch. And the Stormcast's only choice is to hire out these barbarian mercenaries who aren't really hard on chaos. They're just out for cash. I just told you 3 good stories.
I got it.
Well,
so
sorry.
The conversion.
I just told you 3 stories. I don't know if they're good, but I told you 3 stories.
The conversion is 80 marauders converted using flagellants, and they're like zealots. They're Stormcast barbarian zealots, and you do conversions using like the arms from like Blood Reavers. So like the big butch ripped arms. Do some like you have to do weapon swaps. So you don't want the flails. You don't want them to be obvious, but like all the monk robes. And then do like a bunch of butch weapons, and then get some shields, some Stormcasty Sigmari shields from somewhere.
Totally.
And there you go. And then you have a big marauder force,
devoted, who have partnered with the Stormcast, but secretly fall into chaos, and the Stormcast don't realize it. Right? Like they're weakly slaves to darkness at this point. They've been infiltrated. Yeah, like there's 100 cool things you can tell with this. That's my point, right? Like. Again, it's a big, crazy mortal realms where lots of amazing things happen. And this gives you a chance to do this, right?
Yeah.
So, like, great, awesome. More of that. And again, none of this, like, it's good. What we just talked about is good, but it's still not like, we're not talking about world-turning competitive here, Tom. You know what I mean? It's an interesting option for some forces.
And, like, what I'll say is this. What mercenaries are going to appeal to are the Johnnies of the world. Because the reality is at the end of the day, the Johnnies and Timmies. Timmies because they want giants to push around. And the Johnnies because there are going to be some combinations that are just unintended and work way too well.
Sure.
And so an example of that being like all the bodies with the Marauders paired with other things that are going to matter. Or let's...
Like maybe BCR or something?
Like maybe BCR. Yeah, where like BCR needs the bodies. Guess what? For 400 points, they gain 80 bodies.
Yeah, you just got to get up to 6 units, right? So you got to have like your 4 dudes and then 2 units of.
And then you got some Icebrow hunters or whatever you need.
Something like that. Yeah. The saber-toothed dogs or whatever. Those are still cheap, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean that's one option. But then also things like that. How Night Haunt dovetails with the Necromancer, or how the Legion of Grief dovetails with the Rose, the Blood Knight thing, where you can pick a Vampire Lord because they can't get Vampire Lord. Like, so there's a couple of these that I think that are just going to be gas in the engine. Like, I think they're just going to be gold. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm excited. For what this does.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the last one here that we haven't talked about, which is maybe the most interesting and odd one, but it's not good, but it's fun. Okay, so the Scruggs Menagerie Mercenary Company. Okay. 1 Chaos Gargant, and then 0 to 3 units of Chaos Spawn, Chaos Warhounds, and or Furies. which I would suspect Furies are going to get updated rules with Warcry because we know we're getting new Fury models.
Right.
So maybe they won't be utter trash now. So that's
they will be, and it's okay.
That's the thing to watch.
Sure.
Yeah. Furies could get will get a new War Scroll.
But
right? Like
Chaos Giants are still
and
giants.
The new War Scroll could be interesting. I understand. I don't disagree. But anyways, and the Chaos Giant gets to use the 3 command abilities as though he was a hero. Okay. On his stuff. On his spawn Warhounds and
Sure.
Furies. Cool. Okay. Neat.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Neat.
Yeah. There you go. All right. No, I wasn't putting you on blast, Jack. I saw your comment. Just I think that there's so much room in the Mortal Realms, and I want to see people keep exploring interesting stuff like that and telling weird stories. I love the Mortal Realms as a setting so much. I find it so much more interesting than anything that ever happened in the old world. And I understand people have their tastes and whatever you like. It's cool.
Are we gonna do a D&D game in the world sometime?
At some point, yeah. Because traditionally, as I've mentioned before, my favorite D&D world was always Planescape, and I always loved how alliances in Planescape would just shift on a dime, right? And you could, even though normally people from Mount Celestia are very opposed, of course, to demons and devils, but every story had that moment where they're forced to work together against the forces of Mechanus, who are trying to turn everything into a lawful, unthinking machine or something, right? So I love when you can tell really weird stories about that, with stuff like that. So, I like that being brought into this world as well, because this world is big and has lots of corners and spaces to explore. I hope people keep doing. I think
tell stories.
Yeah, I think rules like this help people tell those stories in a way they feel good about. So I love this. More mercenary companies, more weird, crazy stuff, and sure, Luke, I absolutely would love to. And I hope we see more stuff like this. I agree with you. There's so much narrative room to explore. And there's probably there's a ton of stuff we haven't covered yet. There's more narrative in this book. That's kind of the stuff I wanted to cover. Anything else you want to say about GHB Part 2, Tom? In the future, at some point, we're going to do a show about meeting engagements, completely dedicated to meeting engagements, because I think it deserves its own show. Talk about how we see it playing, how certain armies play in it, why it's a completely different format, because it is big. It's a heavy thing they just dropped in here. It deserves its whole own show.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've spent a lot of time thinking about meeting engagements already, and I have a Skyr one that I've been kicking around that I really like. Yeah, I don't know. I think that I look forward to that show. But from what we've done, I think that the scenarios were a nice supplement. I'm excited to see them in action at an event and to see how they're parsing the field. I think that what I'll say is that the curveball that they tossed us with the duality of death, for example, the curveball that they tossed us with duality of death is significant.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And
it's a big deal. It's funny how even very small changes, and that's why I'm kind of sad about total commitment, right? Because there's other ways they could have gone on that in the same way, right? We could have changed the way that was actually working,
and we didn't.
Total commitment could have been as simple as you can't come down. You have to come down by round 2. It could have forced everybody into a beast man ambush thing, right? So you can still lightning strike, but you have to lightning strike in the first round or something like that, right? I don't know, whatever. There are other things that could have been done to push along that same line. So, but the rest I feel we're all really, really positive.
I would agree with that.
All right. So with that wraps it up this week. We'll see whether or not next week we have the FAQ. If so, I think that might determine a large amount of our coverage next week. And the GHB coverage will continue, but otherwise we'll see where we are. Obviously, we're waiting on that. Just so everybody understands where we're going in the next couple months, now that the new GHB is out, now that we have a lot more books out, now that we're careening at a fast pace toward the Age of Sigmar Open Day on July 20th. We're going to be wanting to revisit some armies. We're going to be talking a lot, obviously, about Warcry as we get closer to that. So we'll be doing a lot of like army revisit shows and stuff like that. So look forward to all those. But as always, we thank you very much for watching this one. Hope you had fun, and we'll see you next Wednesday.